Hello and welcome to another edition of the Walpole Business Spotlight. My name is Harry Brusades and I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And the show is brought to you through the efforts of the Walpole Chamber and the Walpole Media TV. The mission of the show is to bring into spotlight local businesses and professionals so our community can get to know, like, and trust these people and businesses and make informed and knowledgeable decisions so they can help themselves and help their families on the products or services that they obtain. Today, I am joined by Paul Hemphill of Planning for College. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Harry.
So, Paul, first off, just a little bit about you and where you're from.
Well, I live in Norfolk, and what I've been doing for the past 15 years is that I've been guiding high school students into finding the right fit college that their parents can afford. And that's a pretty big order for a lot of parents out there who don't know how to go about this whole college process and are literally pulling their hair out and wondering how they're going to make it through. So it's a very stressful time, especially during the senior year of high school. But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy working with 15 and 16-year-olds. They're really funny. They kind of use me as a firewall between themselves and the two dumbest adults they've ever known, their parents. But I get a lot out of them. And because of that, the parents marvel at what it is I can do, but that's because I'm a third-party source. I'm not the parent, and that's the reason why I can get my students to do what they need to do. And it's very rewarding at the same time. So
that's great. As we can imagine, I mean, I can remember back in my day when people were buying cars, they would tell you that would be your second biggest purchase in your life, buying a car. The first being your home. And the way college education costs have continually increased, my God, people are losing sleep over what that bill might look like. So, again, the fact that it's very important to people's family and their financial world, what got you started into this business?
Well, I was really upset one day. My firstborn was in the middle of his senior year of college at a private school where I was sending out these happy checks for $2,200 a month. I'm saying to myself, there's something wrong with this. This is crazy. And I had been advised ahead of time that I wouldn't qualify for any financial aid. And so it was useless for me to fill out any forms or apply for any financial aid. So I kind of bought into that. And so by the senior year, I decided one day to call the financial aid office of this school. And this woman looks at her computer and she says, Ms. Temple, I can see by our computer that you never filled out a FAFSA form. Now, for those of you who don't know what a FAFSA form is, it's a form that parents can fill out or the student fills out that basically allows them to get $5,500 worth of financial aid from the government the first year. So I said, what's a FAFSA form? Which had to be the dumbest question she had ever heard. And her response was, you never heard of a FAFSA form? I said, no. And so, and then that's how the conversation went for the next 10 minutes. I'd say something else, or she'd say something, and I'd say, really? No kidding. She said, you didn't know that? Okay, enough of that, please. And the thing that really got to me was when she said, Ms. Temple, had you filled out a few forms, you easily could have saved yourself $20,000. I was livid when I got off the phone, and I was really in a transition in my life where I wanted to get into another career that had something to do with kids, because I was a marketing specialist and I wanted to find a way to work with kids, but I didn't know how. And so as I'm describing to my wife what this content of this phone call was, she started to smile. I said, what are you smiling for? She says, I think you found yourself your new career. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, think about it. Think of all the parents who are going to be making the same dumb mistakes that we made, okay? And with your marketing background, think about what you're going to be able to do with these students and getting them into their schools of their choice. That could really work for you. And I thought, well, that's not a bad idea.
And what was your career prior to entering into
Well,
this?
I've always been in marketing and advertising. And I was marketing small businesses down on Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket for about 10 years. So, it was a very rewarding experience working down there, but I just needed something to change, so this is how I found it. And one day when I was being interviewed on Fox 25, the person interviewing me was reading through my book, and she noticed something that caught her eye, so she asked me about it on the air. She says, "Mr. Temple, are you still in revenge mode?" And I said, "Yes, one customer at a time," because it was basically my way of getting back at the colleges for what the colleges are doing to people who, as you say, are losing sleep nights and wondering how they're going to pay the bill. And so I developed a lot of very interesting ways in which people don't have to pay these enormous fees for these colleges. And I think what the problem is that parents have a misconception or a misperception as to how to pick colleges, and it's really it's a whole other discussion. But we can get into that if you'd like.
Well, I also can imagine it must be incredibly fulfilling as well. I've seen some of the testimonials up on your website, and not only is it from the parents that are grateful because you saved them money, but the kids were just ecstatic of all the help and advice that you gave them, and it made that whole experience of starting a new life all by yourself, moving out of the home, meeting new friends, by picking the right place. It just made everything really click for them, and that in turn gave them a great start to their career and great grades, and off they went. So what would you say would be the biggest mistake that the parents make before their children actually apply for a college?
Well, I like to use one word, and it's procrastination. We always put off doing something we need to do if we don't understand the mechanics behind it and what it's all about, whether it's paying our taxes or it's figuring out how we're going to approach this whole college thing. I think picking a college, as I say to a parent, how are you going to decide what the college is going to be, and how are you and your student going to make that decision? First reaction I get is, I don't know. And so what they're doing is doing what I would say is the equivalent of a person who just got of legal drinking age and hasn't had a drink, and decides on the advice of his friends to walk into, let's say, the Big Y in Franklin, where they have this huge wine display. Big plug for the Y. All right, there's about 3,000 bottles there, and just think about it. There's also 3,000 colleges out there. So the kid is standing before 3,000 bottles of wine, and how does he decide which bottle he's going to buy? Well, some are going to taste good, some aren't going to taste good, but he's going to have to make a purchase to decide if he likes the taste of the wine. Well, that's kind of a metaphor for how parents pick schools and kids pick schools. They don't know what they want to major in, and when they discover what they want to major in, they find out that the school doesn't either offer the major or it's a very weak major, and maybe they ought to transfer. Wow. And that's the reason why we have a 70 to 80% of our college graduates now not taking 4 years to graduate. They're taking 5 and 6 years. So 5 and 6 is the new norm. Whoever thought we would get to this point? Now, I always say in a workshop, which I'm doing this evening, as a matter of fact, I'm going to ask the audience, what is the most expensive year in college? Does anybody know? So, of course, all the smart guys, will raise their hand and say, well, of course, it's 4 years, with inflation going up and all that, so it has to be the 4th year. And I say, what if I told you that was pretty close? You're pretty close to the right answer. And the right answer is the 5th year. And they look at me like I got 3 heads, right? And I say, and I tell them about the statistic I just mentioned, and I say that 5th year, according to the New York Times, is roughly $68,000. It's the year that you're in school for that extra year, and it's the year of lost income when the student's not in the workforce. Pretty expensive year. So when you're going into looking for a college, what criteria do you use to determine what the college is supposed to be? And the parents really don't know. And they really do it by the seat of their pants.
When you get to that fifth year, do scholarships or grants continue into a fifth year?
Typically, no.
Okay.
And again, that's part of the expense.
Sure, yeah.
See?
And just to be open, I mean, I've got my daughter who's a senior who's now starting her college life in the fall. And that's why I asked that question, because I saw, like, on some of the loans or grants that she was offered, that it was for, I'm pretty sure it was for 4 years.
Right,
and
right.
you have to sustain a certain grade level as well.
Sure.
So before we move on, I wanted to touch base on a word that you used, which was the procrastination word. And as we can all imagine, and with me being in financial services, the most important thing for anybody, whether it's saving for retirement or saving for college, the earlier you start that, the better off you'll be. And it's typically the same dilemma that most people run into. In my business, people never want to talk about things they don't even want to think about, whether that be death of a family member and protecting that through life insurance, or what their retirement might look like. Oh, I'll worry about that when I'm in my 60s. So when we talk about starting to plan for college or save for college, as you can imagine, the earlier you start to do that, the better. So when we think about the next question, how would a student pick a college, and should the parents trust the choices that their students are making? I know there's something else that you offer which is very different. Again, in your strategy and your management of people and students isn't just about helping somebody write an essay and fill out an application.
Right.
It's interviewing that student and that person
Right.
and finding out who they are,
Right.
so they can make that good college choice, correct?
Exactly. It's really the reason why I like to start with students when they're sophomores in high school, because I like for them to take at least 3 months to 6 months in what I call a self-discovery period. Try to find out who they are, what they react to, what they enjoy the most, that sort of thing. And I also like to take them through what I call a series of personality assessments, which major corporations use before they hire someone to fill a position in their company.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that with my students, and my students marvel at what happens in that process, where they discover, for example, that their personality might match several occupations, and they usually end up by telling me that a certain occupation that's on the list really makes a lot of sense for them. And so what I have them do, let's say, for example, it's a nursing career. Well, 17-year-olds or 16-year-olds will have a stereotypical view of what a nurse is, that somebody walks around the hospital wearing a blue mock or something, and they go into a website that guidance counselors have never heard of before, and in that website they type in the word nurse, and up comes 22 different categories of nursing careers that they never knew of. And all of a sudden they feel like a kid in the candy store. Wow, I get all these choices, you know? And so, and it's a lot of fun. And so what I have the students do is research every one of those occupations. And when you click on those occupations, there's a very long descriptive of that occupation that goes on for page after page after page. And of course, a lot of my students like to go right to the bottom of the page where it tells you how much money you can make in that career in that state. Wow, they get there real fast. But it really gives perspective, Harry, as to what a kid really feels good about in terms of a future career, so that we can start connecting the dots. If the student wants to go into, let's say, culinary arts, and she gave me a batch of chocolate chip cookies on the way out of the house, okay? When that study, those results come up, I know where her heart is. Mm-hmm. And her father might think, and this happened to me once, the father was so impressed with his daughter's ability to write blogs and essays and all of that he was hoping she was going to go into some sort of communications career. when the results of this assessment indicated that she was really much more suited towards a culinary arts environment. And so his first reaction to me was, I'm not going to pay $50,000 a year to send my daughter off to a college so she can learn how to make a pastry. And my response to him was, okay, tell you what's going to happen if that happens. If she gets that $80,000 scholarship from a college that has a journalism major and she's off to a journalism school, before the end of that first semester, you're going to get a phone call. And that phone call is going to say, hey, Dad, you want to know something? You know, this is a nice school, it's a nice place, but I hate it here. Now what? The $80,000 is not going to be transferable, and your relationship with your daughter, chances are, is going to change. Do you want that to happen?
No.
And so, in that case, by the way, he decided reluctantly, kicking and screaming, that he would let her go to Johnson and Wales, and she did very well. She loved it. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So what suggestions do you have to picking a college as far as making it a lot easier then?
Well, one of the first criteria that everyone has to be concerned about is cost. And so I always like to say to a parent, the very first question I ask every parent is, how much money are you willing to pay every year to send your child off to college? And in most cases, nobody knows the answer to that question. And I say to them, look, this is a very expensive proposition where it doesn't have to be if you can answer the question. So if the answer is, okay, how about $13,000? Now, to the average person out there who knows that colleges are costing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $13,000 is probably ridiculous. Well, it's not. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. You can go to a website called collegedata.com, and on that page you will see cost of college, and you click on that, and a drop-down menu comes down, and it allows you to choose how much money are you willing to spend, from 0 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20. And let's say you're one of those parents who believes, falsely, unfortunately, that the more that you pay, the better education your child's going to get. I'm a cynic about that. Anyway, so let's say you pick between 10 and 20, because you said 13. So you pick between 10 and 30, and then it's going to ask you what region of the country would you like to study in. So you say to your kid, well, where do you want to study, kid? Florida, Dad, where it's warm. Oh, okay. And so you click on the southern states, and up comes a list of all of the colleges that are within your price range as to what you're willing to pay, and you can just print out the list and say, hey, kid, here's a list of schools that we can afford. Research them, do your stuff, and we'll support you all the way, and we won't have to take out any loans. That's how easy it is to determine that you can afford to pay for a college education without a single loan. Now, of course, you're going to take out some. You're going to take out that $5,500 a year Stafford loan through the school, which goes to $65,000 and then $75,000 and $75,000. And maybe and by the way, the student signs for that, not the parent. I love that part. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, and I think probably the easiest way to tell a parent that they don't have to pay anything for college, for 4-year college, I can do that in less than 30 seconds. Here's how it works. You send your kid off to a community college for 2 years to get all those core courses out of the way. Stafford loan will pay for that, okay, that the student signs for. You don't pay for anything. And then you make sure that he's living at home, which will be your curse probably. But the last 2 years, you send him off to an in-state state school here in Massachusetts. Again, he has to commute. He's living at home, bonding with you all this time. And he takes out the Stafford loan to pay for those, and you didn't have to pay for anything. And he's on the hook for the Stafford loan for maybe $20,000. You think over a 4-year period you might be able to come up with $20,000 to help him out, or you could just put the burden on him.
So just to go back on that, because it is a kind of eye-opening strategy. And again, some people will do it, and some people, you just can't get the kids to go that way.
Right.
So over the first 2 years of going to a community school, you're saying you can get a Stafford loan that will cover that cost completely.
Absolutely.
And what would that total be, ballpark?
$3,500, so the $55,000 will cover it, very nicely.
Okay.
And the community colleges are going to get to the point where they will bump it up to the actual level of 55, so they can get every dime they can.
So community college is $5,500 now for the full year?
Well, not yet. Well, it depends on the school.
Yeah.
They all have different
On average.
costs, but I would say on average you're looking at about $4,000 at this point.
For the full year?
For the full year.
Wow. So all right, so call it 10, and then you've got the next 2 years at a state school, which, a UMass Boston is running, what, 25 to 30 right now?
It's 25 to 30, but as a commuter, it's going to cost you probably $8,000.
Oh, it's that low. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Just to give you some perspective, when I'm in a workshop, I always like to say to people, I want you to pretend I'm a professor at Boston University. So when your daughter comes into my classroom and the school charges you $4,200 for that course, in about 10 minutes I have to run over to UMass Boston where I'm a visiting professor, and I'm going to teach the same course using the same notes when I get over there. And the kids at UMass, their parents are going to be charged not $4,200, but $216 for the same course.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. So
Perspective.
So I had a question here. Is there such thing as an affordable college? So we've kind of addressed that there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit. So my daughter has gone through the Walpole school systems, and I think every kid is different, without a doubt. And she did very well in her studies, and I got great feedback from the guidance counselors here. There needs to be, I think, multiple resources. You can't probably just rely on a college school counselor. It's better to go out and look for people like yourself that have that expertise, as well as doing some of your own searching on the internet, I guess. But taking a multi-pronged approach, I think, towards the education and finding out exactly what the best fit will be for the kid, I think is a great idea. And that goes to, a lot that we talked about when it comes to, you mentioned now the student debt, all right? And we hear a lot about student debt. Can you paint us a picture as far as student debt now and how it's playing out?
Yeah, this is I always like to portray a conversation that's going on across America virtually every day that nobody wants to talk about. I call it the white elephant in the room. Let's pretend for a moment that your daughter graduated from college 2 years ago, and she meets the guy of her dreams, and he feels likewise. And so one Friday afternoon he calls her and says, hey, let's get together for a nice dinner, wine, the works. And she's thinking, yeah, sure. And she's not sure what this is all about. She thinks this is kind of interesting. So they get there, and so they're enjoying their meal. And she's curious as to why this is a special occasion. He says, well, it's not really a special occasion. I just love you madly, and I just had a question I wanted to ask you before our relationship goes any further. And she says, of course, darling, what is it you would like to know? And he says, how much college debt do you have? She burst out laughing. She says, I got lots of debt. Doesn't everybody have debt? And he says, well, I really would like to have a figure, if you don't mind. She says, yeah, I got about $140,000. He says, really? Gee, I've got $60,000. Now, your daughter admires this guy because he's so practical and down to earth and very sensible. And he says to your daughter, sweetheart, if this relationship goes any further, if we, for example, get married, we're going to start off by being $200,000 in debt. Does that make any sense to you at all? And how do you suppose your daughter's going to respond to all of that? And she's going to think, uh-oh, something's coming up. And he says to her, you know what, honey? It's been a great ride for the both of us, but I think we need to go our separate ways because I can't see myself going into a marriage with that kind of debt. Can you? And that is a heartbreaker that nobody's talking about in this country, but it's happening every single day. And part of what I feel is my moral obligation is to point out to my clients that this is not a conversation you want your son or your daughter to have when they get out of college.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to think about those things. And I'm always wondering about why a parent would suggest to a child, and I'll say to some parents once in a while, I'll say, well, not once in a while, all the time, I'll say, how do you intend on paying for this college education? Well, we haven't really thought about it, but I suppose we're going to take out lots of loans. Really? So you're going to pay through this through your IRA or your retirement fund? Yeah, I guess we'll have to do that. No, don't do that. And I'll say, your retirement is a lot more important than your child's education. You're in the last half of your life right now, and your kid's in the first half of their lives, and chances are they're probably going to have a lot more time to pay it off. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you don't have to do that. Debt is not a necessary requirement for going to college. Oh, well, so what bothers me is the parent who says, we'll figure out a way. And I know what they're thinking about. The kids are going to go into all kinds of debt, and I can't tell you enough, Harry, how irresponsible that parent is in thinking in those terms. At least that's my perspective. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it's that same generation that we've seen of people with just multiple credit cards and debt, and they push it down the road, and hopefully things will change, and then they realize when they wake up one day that they're in a whole lot of trouble.
Oh.
So like you said, talking about the future and planning for that future is so very important. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up for today. One thing before I ask you as far as how people can contact you, and quickly if you can, and I'll just say it, one thing that people should all be aware of, when you do get an offer from a college and you've gotten a scholarship, that's great and exciting news, but Paul has let me know that there's a negotiation process that can go with that. You just don't say, I got 10 grand, thank you very much, and hang up the phone. There can be an appeal process with that.
Correct.
And the biggest thing that I think Paul delivers and brings value to these families is his ability to go back and renegotiate and appeal for more money. And you'll be very surprised that the schools are more than welcome to enter into that negotiation process, because at that point they do want the student.
Right.
So as we start to finish up, what is the best way for our community to contact you so you can help their kids?
Would a phone number work?
Sure.
Sure, it's 508-520-6642, or they can go to my website, which is planningforcollege.net.
Excellent. Well, I thank you for your time today.
Thank
I
you,
hope
Harry.
this was very informative to the Walpole community, especially to the families that have young children, especially in high school. The specific target market that Paul likes to work with is sophomores and juniors, so he can get involved in their lives, figure out exactly what they're looking for, and let them and help them make the best decision for them and for the family at large. So the whole family is in this buying process of college, and they're all in, and it becomes the best experience possible. So again, I thank you for joining us today. Be well, be safe.